So thank you everyone for joining me today. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, my name's Tennille and I'm the Geelong Chamber's dedicated mental health clinician and consultant. So I work as part of a greater program called the Partners in Wellbeing program, which is a state-funded mental health and wellbeing initiative to support small business owners and their staff within the community in the wake of COVID-19. So firstly, before we commence today, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people. So they're the traditional owners of the land on which I stand today. And I'd also like to acknowledge all of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Greater Geelong community and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hope of their people. So I'd also like to thank the platinum partner of the Geelong Chamber, which is Pixelled, and also the Chamber's gold and silver partners who are noted on these slides here. Okay, so today's session is all about supporting colleagues and staff. So specifically looking at how to have a conversation about mental health in the workplace. But I am going to start by talking about mentally healthy workplaces in general, just to give a bit of context to why this is such an important topic. So just to flesh out some of the context around today's presentation, I'd like to ensure that we've all got a really clear picture about the importance of this topic for business owners, managers, and really anyone who works in Australia today. It's really important that we develop skills and confidence to be able to broach the hard and sometimes really uncomfortable topic of mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. As you can see here, some of the general statistics around mental health in Australia. So 20% of Australians will experience a mental health concern in any given year. 45% of Australians will experience a mental illness in their lifetime, and 54% of Australians with a mental illness will not seek treatment or support for that. So the estimated cost of mental health to Australian businesses is estimated to be at about $12 billion a year. And this is due to absenteeism, presenteeism, lost productivity, and the cost of work cover claims. So, you know, I'm sure there's a couple of people here who are already across all of this information, but is there anything in any of this that any of you find surprising or any comments about the mental health statistics?
Oh, just that it's appalling, and it's a real hidden cost, it seems, Tennille, that a lot of organisations are not aware of. You know, I'm finding a lot of them are not doing their due diligence, is not looking at this cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that a lot of business owners are aware of these statistics, and you know, I do think that it is a hidden cost because I think that it's very difficult sometimes when you're in a workplace that doesn't openly discuss mental health to really know what's happening for your employees, and therefore to measure how much productivity is being lost to the fact that someone is potentially not as mentally healthy as they could be. So that's right. Just briefly, does anyone here know the difference or want to share the difference between the term mental health and mental illness?
Is no one going to want me to?
Yeah, for sure, Derek.
So mental illness can be defined as having one of many mental illness, where mental health is just a continuum from good mental health to poor mental health that we all experience every day. And this is probably what you'll discuss today, that mental health doesn't mean good or bad. It's just a whole range of mental health that we go through.
Absolutely, it's a continuum, and Derek, you're absolutely right. Mental illness is defined more as a diagnosable condition. So whereas mental health actually refers to the state of someone's mental health at any given time. So like our physical health, this tends to fluctuate, and it depends on context, environment, and how much effort we're putting into maintaining a good level of mental health. So the thing about mental health in organisations that I can absolutely guarantee is that your mental health and the mental health of those around you is impacting your workplaces, organisations and teams. So that's absolutely already happening. So from the highly resilient and particularly mentally healthy employees to those who are struggling to get through the day, each person in an organisation and where they're at with their mental health really impacts how a team operates, how an organisation operates, and how an employee is able to operate. And that occurs whether we openly acknowledge and talk about mental health or not. So this is one of the reasons why there's such a large focus and push for organisations to work on developing mentally healthy workplaces. So if mental health is part of the conversation, then the impacts of poor mental health or when someone is experiencing an event that impacts their mental health, it can be discussed, planned around and managed. Whereas if this isn't part of the conversation, what actually happens is that it does impact the output, it impacts the outcomes for the organisation, but it does so in a way that's not transparent, and it does so in a way that's not controlled or managed. So here are some of the other benefits for developing mentally healthy workplaces. So as you can see, there's a monetary benefit. So this is according to research conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers in collaboration with the National Mental Health Commission, Beyond Blue and the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance in 2014. So for every $1 invested in wellbeing, there is on average a $2.30 return on investment. So this is slightly different across different industries. But you actually find that it gets higher in industries such as manufacturing and construction. So those industries where typically mental health, vulnerability, emotional discussions around emotions, etc., is not supported. So you actually get more of a return on your investment the more guarded people generally are when they walk into the workplace. So finding a workplace that actually understands the importance of supporting employees' wellbeing, it's reportedly the #2 factor that people actually are looking for when they're looking for a job. So this is what actually keeps people in jobs as well. This is what keeps them working for people, is when they actually feel supported. So when leaders are actively and consciously trying to create space for people to be heard, supported, connected, the employees are able to be more engaged in their work, they're more committed to the business, and they're more able to do their best work for the business as well. So the bottom line is that mentally healthy workplaces allow people to be honest and open about their experiences and their points of view. So when people can feel that they can openly ask to be supported by their managers and teams when things are not going well for them, and when they're able to do this without fear of judgment, these employees have the room that they need to be able to show up more fully and contribute more. So at the end of the day, thriving people are the foundation of thriving teams and thriving organisations. So mentally healthy environments support people's wellbeing and mental health, but they're also the environments that allow employees to speak up when they're struggling with their mental health and wellbeing. And in order to illustrate kind of the protective force that a mentally healthy workplace can have in regards to someone being able to speak up about a decline in their mental health, both from an organisational perspective and in terms of the individual's health outcomes, I'm just going to discuss a really quick example. So I want you to imagine that there is a task or project that comes up at work and it's important and time sensitive, and it's likely going to require a lot of effort and potentially some overtime. So everyone in the workplace is pretty much at capacity, but it is an excellent opportunity. And so management decide, sorry, I can't, I have trouble reading the comments and going through everything at the same time. So I'll come back to the comments just afterwards, if that's okay. So management decide to take on the project and allocate a person considered to be most appropriate in terms of their skills and previous successes. However, what's not known is that this employee is not coping at the moment. So they have personal issues relating to the health of a loved one, and they're struggling to keep up with their current workload. So to illustrate, in a workplace where the culture is unkind towards people demonstrating vulnerability, discussing emotions, and revealing details around their personal lives, what we might expect to see in this scenario is that this employee may have already been working very hard to hide the fact that they are not coping. And when the new project is assigned to them, it's not safe for them to be able to admit that they're already overburdened. They can't say no, because that would involve that they're admitting, and that would involve admitting that they're really feeling under pressure. And they feel that the workplace, in this workplace, it would reflect poorly on them and impact their future career prospects. So in order to justify why they might not be currently coping, they may also need to reveal some of the events that are happening in their personal life that have contributed to the decline in their current mental health and well-being. But in a workplace like this, this is risky, because there is a strong belief in the workplace that you leave your personal issues at the door. So this situation actually puts this employee at risk of further declines to their mental health. It even exposes them to the possibility of burnout or of developing a mental illness. So, and the business is facing a risk it's not even aware of. So the risk of lost money in regards to the employee's reduced productivity, presenteeism, and absenteeism. So this employee may not be able to meet the deadline for this project or others that they are currently on due to the issues around the workload and the workplace, and the workplace may actually be leaving themselves open to a future work cover claim on the basis of stress if this employee's condition continues to deteriorate due to the additional pressures at work and needing to do overtime for this project. Now, on the other hand, in a mentally healthy workplace that actively creates an environment where people can be honest and, if necessary, vulnerable, without fear of judgment or of impacting their career prospects, this employee may have felt more comfortable in saying no to taking on the project, and okay with giving a brief overview of why. Or even better, their direct supervisor may already be aware of the situation and be able to develop a plan to assist the employee with their existing workload and ensure that the person has adequate support, and have a communication plan in place that the employee knows how to access additional support if it's needed, if things kind of turn sour outside of work. So in both these situations, the emotional and psychological state of the employee is going to be impactful for the employee, for the organisation, and for the project. So in the second scenario, that impact is managed, whereas in the first, it's not. Now, as we turn towards the specifics of having a supportive conversation with a colleague or staff member about their mental health, I just want to highlight the following points. So given the rates of mental illness in the Australian population, and given the state of people's mental health fluctuates throughout their lifetime and in response to events, contexts, and environments, it is almost certain that anyone working with other people in Australia will, at some point in their career, work with someone, manage someone, be managed by someone, or be someone who struggles with a mental health condition. The most impactful and protective factor for both businesses and individuals when it comes to the impact of employee mental health in the workplace is proactively developing a mentally healthy workplace. Okay. So now let's turn to the specifics of having a conversation with a colleague or staff member when you're concerned about their mental health. It's difficult. It can be a difficult time when you find yourself worried about the well-being of a workmate or staff member. You may not feel prepared or confident to approach them and have a conversation about their mental health and well-being. But starting a conversation with someone whom you're concerned about can help them to open up, share their worries with you, and seek further support if necessary. So when do you initiate that conversation, and what are the signs to look out for? So one of the important signs to look out for is that the person actually seems different to their usual self. The following kind of list of things to look out for is really based on change. So if someone really changes their behavior or their attitude, that's really a red flag that something else might be going on for them, whether that be work related or whether that be personally related. So there's been a change in their behavior, whether that be they might be showing up to work late, they might be calling in sick quite a lot, they might be grumpy or irritated with people around them, they might be withdrawn or more quiet than normal, appear exhausted all the time, have low energy and motivation. So easily annoyed, frequently irritable, and that this is out of character for them. So they're not present at work. They procrastinate often and they're missing work deadlines, or they're not finishing tasks as they normally would do. They appear to be worrying excessively about everything. So these are all significant changes in someone's behaviour. And if you notice them, the best thing is actually, to address them and to really kind of plan out, either yourself or someone else actually having a conversation with the person to check on them and their well-being to see if they're okay. So how do you start that conversation? Talking to a staff member or colleague about their mental health and well-being isn't always easy, but keep in mind that by reaching out, you might be the reason that they actually get the help that they need. So often people want to talk, but poor mental health makes them feel isolated and alone. And by starting the conversation, you're offering them an olive branch and helping them to see that they aren't alone. The timing is crucial. It's probably not appropriate to walk up to someone in the middle of a busy office space where everyone can hear the conversation. So picking your timing and approaching the person when they're alone and ensuring that you are not time limited is really important. So really don't start this conversation if it's not something that you can commit to and see through. So when you do have the time to be able to have the conversation, finding a place that's appropriate is really important as well. So usually a quiet or confidential space and confidential space. Generally taking someone out for a coffee may be a good idea, may seem like a good idea at the time, but someone who is really struggling with their mental health may feel very self-conscious about disclosing what's happening for them in any busy place, regardless of the people who are around them. If you do know a cafe with a quiet and confidential space, that's a bit of a different thing. So you very simply start the conversation by asking them questions along the lines of, is everything okay? You don't seem like yourself. Reflecting the changes that you've actually seen in a person can be a really powerful way, and also just highlighting the fact that you actually notice these changes, but you're starting this conversation from a place of concern and curiosity, and not from a place of judgment. So keeping the conversation going. Encourage the person to talk. So using open-ended question like, what's on your mind, or tell me a little bit more about what's going on for you at the moment. So open-ended questions encourage people to be able to share. Close-ended questions that prompt a yes or no answer do not prompt people to be able to share what's actually happening for them at the moment. It really shuts down the conversation and it will not get them to open up. So actively listen and give the person time to talk without interrupting them or providing advice. So let them speak and avoid the temptation to fill the silence. So it's better to say, you know, that sounds really difficult, or, you know, I don't know what to say. That sounds like a really challenging situation you're in. And then sit in silence to wait for them to actually continue to talk and share their story. So rather than rambling or trying to jump in and fix things, often the situation isn't fixable. But feeling heard and feeling connected with can make it a bit more bearable. So once they've told you what's going on, try to reflect back what you've heard and ensure that you've understood. So you can try things like, you know, it sounds like you were really struggling with, or let me check that I've got this all right. You know, I'm hearing that you're feeling really overwhelmed. Is that right? So reflecting back and checking that you understand the emotional experience that the person is actually going through as well, not just the situational experience, can be a really powerful way of helping someone to feel heard and connected. Really feeling as though people get that situation and are trying to understand that situation, can hear the emotional experiences rather than just the events, is a really powerful way for people. It has a real power for people who are sitting in struggle. So by offering the reflection as a question, what you're doing is that you're using a tentative approach. So to avoid sounding judgmental, to avoid sounding as though you kind of are saying that you know or understand what the person is going through, using tentative language to check that you have an understanding of their situation and their emotional experience is really important. So being tentative by offering a reflection or asking a question so that the person has the opportunity to be able to correct you. It's really important in these situations to really move away from that, that desire to be right or to have an answer. That's not what these conversations are about. It is about connecting and sitting with someone when they are in a dark place. It's about looking around and going, yeah, I see this, and I can see why it is that you're struggling or feeling the way that you're feeling, rather than saying, I know how to fix this, or I know what it is that you should do. That really moves the person away, and it really can impact the connection that you're trying to build with someone when they are in a dark moment. Now, I'm going to show you 2 quick videos. And the first one's less than 3 minutes, and it's just a really great explanation about responding to someone with empathy. So I'll pop that one on now, although I do have to stop sharing for a second. Sorry, guys.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Yeah, that's a really great one. So that one is actually from the researcher Brené Brown, who has been researching human empathy, courage, connection for the last 20 years. And she has actually written a book it's called Dare to Lead. And I really encourage anyone who's interested to give it a read, because it is a really powerful and different way of looking at leadership and how to get the best out of your teams. Oops, sorry guys. So this next video that I'm going to play for you is just a short 1-minute video, and it was produced by the Black Dog Institute. So it's titled, If You're Worried About Someone, Have a Conversation. So having a conversation with a colleague or a member of staff could be the first step towards this person actually seeking to take care of their mental health and their well-being.
If you notice any change in behaviour in a colleague or team member, ask yourself if they could be struggling with their mental health. And if you're worried, start a conversation. Choose a private and comfortable place to have the conversation, and make sure you have enough time. Mention the change in behaviour you've noticed. Encourage the person to talk by using open-ended questions. Listen actively, giving the person time to talk without interrupting or giving advice. Avoid the temptation to fill the silence. Reflect back some of the things you've heard to show you understand. Encourage the person to seek help by asking what they plan to do, and help them to decide on the first steps towards a solution. Follow up by speaking to the person again a few days later. Ask them how they are and what steps they've managed to take since you last met. If they don't want to talk to you, you could suggest meeting at a different time, or finding someone they may feel more comfortable talking to.
Offering assistance and connecting people in with supports. So sometimes it can be really powerful once a person has had a chance to feel heard and a chance to be able to tell their story and what's actually happening for them. A simple question like, what do you feel that you need right now, can be really very useful. So it indicates that you're not presuming to know what it is that they need, and it's inviting them to engage in the next steps of the process. So you're empowering them by putting them in the seat and saying, you are the expert here. You are the one who is going to be able to move forward from this situation. And while others can support you in being able to do that, you're the person who knows and can identify the things that you really need in this moment and what's going to be most helpful to you. So they may not know, and that's okay too. So this is where you might be able to just offer a few suggestions, and it would really vary depending on what's going on for the person. If they're overwhelmed, they might be overwhelmed with their workload, for example, like the example that I discussed earlier. So you could explore ways to ease the pressure for them, or they might be struggling financially. So you could offer to help explore options for support, such as links to financial counselling. So it's really important to remind them at this point that they're not alone, but encourage them to also speak to loved ones. So asking them, you know, who else is on this journey with you? Who else have you told? Have you told anyone else about what's happening for you in this moment? To try and get an idea of how connected they are with a support system. So, and lastly, offer to connect them with external support services. So if the answer is I haven't told anyone, I haven't sought any support or help, and I don't feel like I can tell my family, you know, offering to help them to connect with external supports, you know, is something that you can put on the table. So you can hop online together to explore some options, and even help them make a phone call. So try not to do this for them, but do encourage them to do it themselves with you beside them. So resilience comes from doing things for themselves, and having multiple support mechanisms and feeling that sense of self-determination. So although you want the person to be able to reach out for the supports, ultimately that really needs to be their choice. And what you can do is just to say, you know, I am here for you, and I can sit next to you while you do this. And we can do what it is that you feel that you need at this moment together. So there are a range of ways that you might be able to support someone suffering from a decline in their mental health and well-being, to be able to help them cope and assist in their recovery. So you can do this as an employer. So here, I'll give you a few examples of the way that you might be able to support a staff member who's struggling at work, or if you are a staff member who's struggling at work, some of the things that you might be able to ask your manager for, if they're not across this type of stuff. So after you've had the conversation, when you're looking to put some stuff in place for them, to help them stay in work while they're addressing their wellbeing concerns. So allowing for personal phone calls at work for emotional support. So allowing time for people to be able to reach out to their support network, and pull them into the workspace. So if there's someone that they call that is going to be available to them when they need to decompress, or that is a really strong rock for them emotionally, allowing them the time to actually reach out to that person during the workday if they are feeling overwhelmed. Flexible start and finish times can be really helpful. So particularly if someone is struggling to get sleep, a later start time can be very helpful. If they are struggling to get to sleep, or if there is some type of family commitment that they need to get to after work, talking about flexible finish times. So using that work flexibility wherever possible to be able to support a person to manage what they need to outside of the workplace. Approving time off for any medical and psychological appointments. This doesn't need to be a whole day. So often, you know, if someone is worried about family commitments and getting support from a psychologist and the time that that's going to take up in terms of travel, etc., you can actually offer, you know, a period of time for them to be able to go to the GP or to go to the psychologist and then come back to work on the same day. This can often be really helpful for people. You know, and one of those things in a mentally healthy workplace that it's really important, it's a really important benefit, because in a workplace where psychological and emotional health isn't discussed, or people feel that it's not able to be discussed, talking about taking a part day off for an appointment can be really threatening. So often people will actually take the whole day off and call in sick, rather than to talk to their manager about taking off just a couple of hours. So negotiating a reduced workload if possible. So again, this is one of the things where it depends on, I suppose, your workplace and what you can offer. But reducing someone's workload can be really important in terms of being able to alleviate some of the stress. And although it can be one of those things that people are very hesitant to do, it is one of those things that you can consider an investment into the person's future ability to be able to be productive. and to be able to be really present at work. So sometimes a reduced workload for a week or two is going to be enough for someone to be able to start to address some of the issues that they're worried about, whereas not reducing the workload could lead to that escalation of stress and to the eventual kind of, reduced productivity and absenteeism. So keeping in contact with the person and regularly asking how they're going. So this is really key, especially if you have had a conversation with them about their mental health and you've sat down and they've shared their really personal story with you. So keeping in contact with the person and just regularly checking in with how they're going, asking whether or not they want to have another conversation at any point, and asking how the things that you have put in place for them or the supports that you have put in place for them at work are going, and whether or not there's anything else that they need. I think that it's very, it can give people a really good sense of being supported in the workplace when that contact is continued, and when it's sort of like not just a one-off conversation that you've had with someone and then some actions that you've taken. So it's really, really key to follow up with people. Now, sometimes when people come into work and they approach their manager and they say, look, I'm not coping because of X, Y, Z, employers are really quick to offer time off. And, in some cases, this can be the right thing to do, but it is good to kind of assess the situation and maybe ask the employee what it is that they would like to do. Giving them an idea of some of the things that you would be able to do to support them to stay at work. It can be detrimental to mental health if people go off work in situations where they're going to feel isolated and alone. So many people with mental health issues can function at work, and work can play a really important role in their recovery. So some of the benefits for staying at work for someone who is struggling with their mental health is that sense of belonging for the person. So that sense of connectedness to colleagues and to the team and to managers, it really helps to avoid them becoming really isolated. It gives the person a sense of achievement, so in maintaining productivity. So it gives them something to do, and it gives them a sense of achievement at the end of the day when they've managed to do something and do something well. And this is another reason why the consideration to reduce workload is really important, because if someone does decide to stay at work, but they have disclosed that they aren't coping well, they're highly stressed, or their mental health is in decline, maintaining their workload as is, or giving them more work to do, can actually then add to that stress. So just because they're staying in the workplace doesn't necessarily mean that they need to sign up to do the same amount of work that they were doing before. It doesn't necessarily need to be that dichotomy of either or. You're either here and doing everything you did before, or you're off. So having a reduced workload and things that are easily managed actually helps that person to maintain productivity. It helps them to remain linked into the workplace, and if they're given goals which they can achieve even when they are stressed and potentially not at their most productive, then that really helps them to feel good about themselves and what they can contribute. It can be a really healthy distraction from person's worries and concerns. So particularly when people are feeling isolated or alone, particularly when they live alone, or their families are outside of the house all day, if they do take time off, what can happen is that they may think about the things that are causing a decline in their mental health, and that thinking may become rumination. So rumination being that kind of compulsive worrying and thinking about the things that have gone wrong without actually attaching anything that is constructive or working towards something else. So just thinking about it and just spending a lot of time with those thoughts. And as you can imagine, that really creates this kind of, kind of digging a whole kind of situation where the person really thinks about the situation, then they experience those negative emotions because of the situation that they're thinking about. They see no way out of the situation, so then they feel those feelings more intensely, then they think more about that situation, using more maybe intense language or self-talk about that situation, and the cycle continues downwards. So being able to have a healthy distraction from their worries, where they have an opportunity to be able to think about something else, can be really important and really powerful in terms of helping them to recover. So getting peer support from colleagues and the employer. So having those conversations with colleagues, often there'll be someone in the workplace that someone feels really connected to, and they will maybe disclose what's happening for them as well. So being able to get support from the people around them is a really key part of staying in the workplace. So removing any perceived fear that can arise after time off work. So sometimes there is a reluctance to come back to work after a period of time off because of the questions that might come from co-workers about why that time off has been required, or what the person has been doing, and how those co-workers may react, or how the managers or other people in other teams may react to that time off as well. There's also, and this is something that I think a lot of people are actually maybe experiencing at the moment, going from remote working in the COVID environment to coming back into the workplaces. There is sort of a social aspect that a lot of people find quite daunting when you go from being in a situation of being alone and being in your own environment to then having to go into the environment at work and having to navigate those conversations, relationships, and in, you know, the other environment that is beyond their control, that can compound and become a real reluctance to actually go back into the workplace. So as a company, as a colleague or as a manager, the people around are better able to track the person's progress and recovery. So you're actually able to see the improvements as they happen, which is really heartening. It makes people feel really positive about people's recovery. You can reflect what you're seeing as well to the person. So that really is very helpful in terms of having a mirror, as being like, you know, I can see over the past week or the past couple of weeks that things have really turned a corner for you. When a person's working really hard on trying to manage their mental health, sometimes they don't necessarily see the progress they've made. So being able to reflect that progress back to them can be really powerful and really help them with their recovery as well. And the person's able to maintain routine. So a good routine is really powerful in terms of being able to support someone to maintain good mental health and keep moving forward. So when is time off absolutely needed? Because it is, you know, it absolutely is in some cases required. People really need to have some time off. So it's really important that a person who is at risk of self-harm or suicidal behaviour is offered some time away from the workplace. You know, at that point, if someone discloses that this is something that is happening for them, you know, they're linking them in with supports, checking in on them, absolutely, but offering them some time away from the workplace in order to be able to get the maybe more intensive support that they need at this point. So if a person is a danger to others or significantly affecting other employees, so someone who is very angry in the workplace, or who is really impacting the mood and culture of the workplace in a way that's not helpful and not constructive, should probably be reflected to them in a supportive way. So supportive would probably sound along the lines of, you know, we have noticed a real change in your mood, and while we understand that you are going through a really difficult time, the behaviours that you've been exhibiting at work are not appropriate. We really want to be able to support you to get the help that you need, but at the moment we feel that you need to have some time off or away from the workplace. Separating out that behaviour as unacceptable and the person as someone who is in need of support. So those are two different things. And that's how to really have that support, have that conversation supportively. The person is still whole. The person is in need of support. The person is worthy of support. The behaviour that they're exhibiting is unacceptable. So if there's any signs of psychosis. So any signs of psychosis would include delusions, paranoia, or hearing voices. I think that it would be fairly obvious if someone in the workplace was exhibiting any of these signs, the behaviour would be pretty odd. So if the employee is acutely depressed or very agitated and unable to control their emotions. So this is just about people who are having kind of outbursts, maybe uncontrollably crying at work or having panic attacks. So again, this is an indication that the person is potentially in need of some more intensive support. And while encouraging them and supporting them to access that support is really key, not having them in the workplace, because as workplaces do have requirements to be able to protect other employees and any customers into that space as well. And if someone is really not in control of their emotional experiences or their behaviours, that has to be taken into consideration as well. So finally, what to do if someone discloses that they're suicidal. So to be honest, I really hope that this is something that no one here ever has to manage. But truthfully, it does happen. And it's really important to know what to do when it does. So the first thing is don't panic. So a person wouldn't have disclosed this to you if you hadn't made them feel comfortable. So if they weren't comfortable telling you what was happening, they wouldn't. The fact that they've told you and they've reached out to you probably means that they are looking for some kind of support in this moment. Always take it seriously, stay with them, and then reach out for assistance. So it's really important in this situation, regardless of whether or not the person says that they really want to just tell you, it's really important to say, I am not, or, to, I suppose, acknowledge the fact that you are not a suicidal intervention expert unless you are, and no one expects you to be. So reaching out to emergency services is really crucial at this point. So calling 000 is absolutely something you can do if you think that someone is at immediate risk of hurting themselves or someone else. And then staying with the person until the ambulance arrives. The primary mental health network is also an option. So in Geelong, you can reach out to the primary mental health network who can speak to the person and assess the risk for you. You can take the person to a hospital or to an emergency department, or you can call Lifeline, a family member, friend, or a doctor. So in this situation, it's really important to try and be collaborative and ask the person what it is that they feel that they would be most comfortable with, but not connecting with a service or with a support when they have disclosed suicidal intentional thoughts is really, I would not put that on the table as an option. So potentially kind of having that conversation of say, I'm really happy that you've reached out. I'm really happy that you've told me this. What I would really like to do is to support you to be able to get what you need in this moment. And I don't think that I have the capacity or skills to be able to give that to you. What would you be most comfortable with us doing next? Would you like to call emergency services, etc., etc.? So having that conversation and being very clear about your boundaries is a really important thing as well. Because in that situation, I would really suggest that, particularly if you know the person quite well, to get some support afterwards as well. If you're not sure, you are actually able to call Lifeline as a supportive person and get some advice about what to do. So here I've included some possible support services which are good to have around and in your pocket in case they are needed in one of these situations. So Alcohol and Drug Foundation Lifeline, which is around crisis and emotional support, Men's Line Australia, Beyond Blue, Heads Up, and the Black Dog Institute. Okay, so that's about it from me. Are there any questions, queries, or comments?
Yeah, Tennille, you mentioned at the start about the number 2 concern for people was, in fact, trying to find a mentally healthy workplace. And I know just dealing with a friend who's left a toxic workplace, is there a website where you can, before you go to a company and they say, yes, we'll support you and everything's lovely, but you find actually it's the opposite. Is there a website where you can rank workplaces on how mentally healthy they are? How does someone know?
I'm not sure if there's a specific website for that. There are places such as that Seek and a couple of other, I think Indeed as well, where employees are actually able to rate their workplaces. So particularly with the larger workplaces, there will be some information about that. I think it's really important when you are interviewing for a workplace to have a really candid conversation with the manager that you are in the interview with about what they do to support their team and what they feel is the number one thing in their mind that helps people to thrive. I think that's a really important question to ask. I think that asking how they help their people thrive will give you an idea of whether or not that person believes that wellness is an important part of how they manage their team, because I think that it will be part of that response. Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Brad. Yes, Barwon Health Mental Health Triage 24/7 available. So that's the 1300 number available there as well. All right, so I'd like to thank you all very much for coming along today. And I just wanted to remind you as well that the services that I'm offering are a part of the state government funded Partners in Wellbeing program. So we offer a range of support services to Victorian businesses for free. So that includes psychosocial support, financial counselling, and also business mentoring. So there are other members of the team who are placed around the state in the same role of myself, and someone from the Partners in Wellbeing team is contactable 7 days in a week on the 1300 number there. So if you do have any questions or you want to ask anything about financial counselling or business mentoring, please don't hesitate to get in touch.